Welcome back to DCB's weekly college football recap. All right, here we go, folks. Welcome into the show. It is time to recap college football week 13, as well as look ahead to the final week of the regular season, rivalry week, week 14. Tons of big games, so make sure you're locked in for this episode. We'll have a bunch of best bets to look forward to, and as always, plenty of insights from this previous week of games. Before we get into it, I would appreciate if everybody out there listening could subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. We are going to be transitioning over to college basketball as college football starts to wind down, but we'll continue to bring the content to you guys, so make sure that you are subscribed. All right, as always, we begin by looking at some midweek maction, going all the way back to Tuesday night. The first game that stuck out to me was Akron picking up a road win, 19-16 at Bowling Green. That is actually Akron's final game of the season on November 18th. They have a week off for the final week. Not sure how that really helps them at all, especially since they will not be going to a bowl game. The one bye week that they did have, they actually played on a Tuesday the following week after playing a normal Saturday game the week prior. So Akron essentially just played an entire season of football on zero rest. So props to them for finding a way to go 5-7, even with Nebraska on the schedule in the non-conference. Definitely a step up from the past couple of years, and maybe next year they'll make a bowl game. Western Michigan started very slow on the road at Northern Illinois, going down 13-0 early in the second quarter, but scored 35 unanswered after that. Really just dominated from that point forward. Western remains in the driver's seat to hold on to one of the title game slots in the MAC. Unfortunately, this conference is completely out of the playoffs contention, but Western can still finish 9-4 with a win in that game if they were to make it. Nothing too notable from the Wednesday night games. Both favorites took care of business, with Miami of Ohio going on the road and beating Buffalo 37-20. They went to their third string quarterback early in this game, Thomas Gotkowski, and he actually looked very good. So maybe that's a promising sign for the future. He is just a freshman. And then Central Michigan beat Kent State 28-16. I believe CMU is still alive in the MAC title picture as well, but they would need some help with some tiebreakers. We had one game on Thursday night, and it was in the Sun Belt. This game was very odd from a viewership perspective. The score was 27-24 at halftime, but the teams combined to score just 13 points in the second half, and Arkansas State managed just one field goal as the home team. They actually took that field goal after a long drive instead of going for it on 4th and short to potentially tie the game. Left themselves still down by 4 points, needing a touchdown anyways. So very bizarre choice there by Butch Jones, and his team pays for it. Both of these teams now sit at 5-6, so they both need to win their final game if they want to make it to a bowl. Couple of big matchups on Friday night. First in the ACC, Florida State hit the road to take on North Carolina State, and they continue to struggle mightily on the road, the Seminoles do. A loss here drops them to 0-4 straight up on the road this season, all in ACC play. They will take the road again this week in a game that we will certainly talk about later, but really this was the first time NC State's defense has looked good all season long, holding the Noles to just 11 points. The Wolfpack have earned themselves a spot in a bowl here, while Florida State drops to 5-6, although they did just affirm that Mike Norvell will be back for another season in 2026. And the other game was out on the West Coast between Hawaii and UNLV. Thought this was going to be a very close game, and I really thought that the road team had a great chance here. UNLV really was not a very impressive team on paper, but they dominated this one from start to finish, 38-10. I would say their best performance of the entire season. Maybe that gives them some kind of a boost heading into rivalry week where they will face a suddenly hot Nevada team. Moving over to the main show on Saturday, let's start with Miami. They continue to look impressive as they try to build a case for an at-large bid. For some reason, they remain about 4 or 5 spots behind Notre Dame in the polls, even though they have the head-to-head win with the same record. I guess the pollsters are not as impressed by Miami's overall resume, given that their 2 losses are both to ACC teams. But all that Miami can control right now is the way that they play in the present, and they really dominated this one from start to finish against Virginia Tech, picking up a 34-17 win. VT scored late to make it look a little bit closer than it was, but Miami was in control from the start. Carson Beck played phenomenally in this one, going 27 for 32 for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Malachi Toney continues to play like one of the best freshmen in America. Staying in the SEC, SMU gives themselves a chance to make it to the ACC title game with a blowout win over Louisville, 38-6. The Cardinals tried a new quarterback in this one with Deuce Adams. It was rumored that Miller Moss was dealing with some kind of injury. Adams certainly struggled in this one, throwing for just 94 yards and rushing for 14 on 7 attempts. SMU's front seven has started to live up to their potential as the season has gone on, and Kevin Jennings has definitely gotten more efficient. That's now 2 of his last 3 games with no interceptions, and a big game statistically all around here for him. If SMU beats Cal this weekend, they are in the ACC title game once again for the second straight year, and these are their first 2 seasons in the conference, so very impressive for that program. One more ACC shout out before I move over to some bigger matchups. Wake Forest, a win over Delaware. The specific result is not that notable, but the fact that Wake Forest is 8-3 is very notable. This team was picked to finish second to last in the ACC, at least in the odds market, so they have completely overachieved. Big shout out to them and to their head coach, Jake Dickert. He is building something there in Winston-Salem. The biggest game in the early window was Missouri traveling to Oklahoma, and this was a pretty gross game as far as entertainment purposes go. Oklahoma wins it 17-6. It really looked from the jump like Missouri was going to be the better team here. They went right down the field and kicked a field goal on their first possession. Their defense was flying around and pressuring John Mateer. However, as they often seem to do, the Sooners' defense and special teams make some big plays in this one to give them a spark, and all they needed was 17 points. So OU now puts themselves in a position where they just need to beat LSU in the season finale, and they will be in the playoff field. Very impressive turnaround after a very disappointing season a year ago. Northwestern with a big win over Minnesota, 38-35. This was a surprisingly entertaining game. You don't see too many shootouts between old school Big Ten West programs like this, but both teams really were able to move the ball effectively up and down the field, especially Northwestern, who put up 525 total yards of offense. Parker Stone had easily his best performance of the year, and their running back Caleb Komolafe continues to burst onto the scene. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns on the season now, and he's got a chance to reach 1,000 yards, especially now that they have clinched a spot in a bowl game. Head coach David Braun is one of the most underrated in the sport. He got thrown into a very difficult position last year and has done nothing but impress in both seasons as Northwestern's head coach. One Big 12 shout out that's deserved before we move on to some later games. Arizona with a win over Baylor moves to 8-3, another team with a big time turnaround in just 1 year. Noah Fafita, veteran quarterback, has stuck around there and really been a staple for this program. He hasn't put up the craziest numbers all year, but he's been a great team player. This has been a very balanced team all season. Arizona, you typically think of them just throwing the ball around, but they've really been able to run it effectively, and they've been one of the best defenses in the Big 12 all season long. We will talk about them more when we preview their rivalry matchup this week. On the Baylor side, they have really struggled down the stretch here. They did not benefit from their schedule this season. Really difficult games early on. They opened with Auburn. They also played SMU out of conference, and it seems to have just taken a toll on this team. They also just don't have enough talent at the line of scrimmage right now, but they did confirm that Dave Aranda will be back next season, so clearly they've seen enough to give him some more time there. Notable group of 5 result early in the day was James Madison just barely squeaking past Washington State 24-20. Washington State has been very competitive against the best teams that they've played. They blew out San Diego State. They lost by just 3 at Ole Miss and by just 2 at Virginia. They also blew out Toledo, and they really had a chance to win this game outright. The box score was very even all around, and they had a lead for a decent portion of this game, but James Madison scores a late touchdown to steal this one 24-20. The margins are thin between these group of 5 teams battling for one playoff spot, and unfortunately this result may hurt JMU. If you look at the playoff odds, they have dropped significantly after this game. It really appears that whoever wins the American Conference title will be the one to receive that bid at this point. All right, let's go to the mid-afternoon window where there was plenty more action to discuss. I will say the board this week was not the best due to the fact that a lot of the SEC was playing much inferior competition, some FCS teams. However, we still had plenty of conference matchups around the country, so let's begin with a couple of Big Ten matchups. We'll start with my boys in blue. Don't look now, but Michigan finally put together a good performance on the scoreboard. This team has been extremely banged up all season long on the offensive line, in the secondary. Now at running back, Justice Haynes likely will not return for the season, and Jordan Marshall also did not play in this one at Maryland. However, it seems like Michigan just has unlimited running backs. Bryson Cudsdall, the former walk-on, he got 20 carries for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. Bryce Underwood also has continued to find his groove over the past couple of weeks ever since the bye week. He has a great connection with fellow freshman Andrew Marsh. Marsh, over the past 2 games, has more receiving yards than any individual receiver for Michigan did all of last season. That definitely says more about Michigan's lack of a passing threat last year than it does about him, but he still has been extremely impressive, over 600 yards on the season now. And when Underwood is seeing the field and he's using his legs, and he's got Marsh and Donovan McCulley on the other side and using both of the tight ends as well, this offense can be very lethal, and you saw it here, putting up 45 points on the road at Maryland in what is a classic look-ahead spot the week before Ohio State, but not in this case. They did show some vulnerabilities defensively, but Terps quarterback Malik Washington has shown an ability to make some plays all throughout the year. Another freshman on that side, so 2 freshman QBs going at it in this one. It was a pretty entertaining game, one of the few this season for Michigan, and they have certainly built some momentum going into the Ohio State game. We will talk much more about that one coming right up. Another one in the mid-afternoon Big Ten slate was Iowa, making a comeback and holding off Michigan State 20-17. Sparty had a 10-point lead into the fourth quarter in this one, 17-7. And just could not hold on. Their offense just not able to make the plays necessary down the stretch. Couldn't really get anything going in the run game. Their starting running back averaged just 2.2 yards on the ground. That Iowa defense obviously very difficult to run on. And to MSU's credit, they also held their own defensively against the run. but Mark Gronowski threw for 147 yards, one of his higher totals of the season. No joke, in 11 games, that is his third highest passing yards total. And yet your Iowa Hawkeyes sit at 7-4. They just do it a different way up there. They find a way to win these games. So credit to Iowa. This is what they do. We'll see if they can do it again this week against Nebraska. In hindsight, I'm not quite sure how I didn't lead off with this one, especially when talking about the Big Ten. But how about Oregon? A double-digit win over USC, 42-27. Very impressive. Can't lie. I was not expecting this one. I thought there were enough ways for USC to win the game outright that they would at least compete here. The line was very telling in this one, though. It moved throughout the week from Oregon -9.5 over the key number of 10 to 10.5. Ended up not mattering. Ducks cash you out no matter what number you got. And it was because they were able to run the ball pretty consistently all game long. They did have pretty solid balance. Dante Moore had a decent game. But that run game is something that they can lean on pretty consistently. The O-line is very, very good. And as improved as USC is, especially in the physicality department, clearly not quite enough to stand up to this test that Oregon gave them. USC, 28 carries for 47 yards on offense for just 1.7 per carry. The receivers made some nice plays, as always, but just not enough on the road here. Oregon, a different level of team, clearly. Quick mention for Notre Dame, an absolutely ridiculous score against Syracuse, a 70-7 win here against an ACC team. Hard to believe, but the score was 21-0 Irish before the offense even stepped onto the field. The defense had 2 pick sixes, and then they also returned a punt for a score in between those two. Syracuse is having a real tough time right now. The quarterback situation is very bad. They've got a former lacrosse recruit playing that position. But I also can't take anything away from Notre Dame right now. To me, they are the best team in the country at this current moment. CJ Carr is better than Riley Leonard was last year. Their run game is incredible. Jeremiah Love might be the best player in college football, and Jadarian Price is probably a top 5 back in the sport as well. Malachi Fields has emerged as a true wide receiver 1, and the defense, after struggling to start the year, is now balling. So I would take Notre Dame to win the national title right now, depending on the odds, obviously, but take that as you will. I will certainly be placing that wager myself. There were a couple of SEC on SEC matchups. First off, Vanderbilt continues to keep their playoff dreams alive with a dominant win over Kentucky, 45-17. This game got off to a very slow start as Vandy went on a 10-minute drive in the first quarter and settled for 3. As an over-better in this game, I was shaking in my boots, but we were still fine. Vandy's offense is so explosive, and they've got a ton of different playmakers. The scheme is great. Diego Pavia is playing the best ball of his life. Over 500 total yards by him alone in this one. 484 through the air. Just carved up that Kentucky secondary all night. The Wildcats now fall to 5-6, and they've got rivalry week to potentially make it to a bowl. Texas also took care of business in another major shootout against Arkansas. This Hogs defense has just been an absolute disaster all season long. 52 points here by Texas. It's unfortunate because Arkansas's offense is very, very good. They average almost 35 points per game, but they are 2-9, maybe the best 2-win team of all time. Obviously, they've played a ridiculous schedule, but the defense needs major overhaul in 2026. There were several key group of 5 games that we needed to keep our eyes on. First, Toledo just continues to steamroll through these bad MAC teams. They beat Ball State 38-9. There was a major bad beat in this one, though, if you had Toledo, depending on the number that you had. Ball State scores a touchdown with under 4 minutes remaining. They did go for two and fail, which left them at 9 points. So Toledo wins 38-9. If you had minus 28, you're good. If you had 29.5, which is what the number closed at, you got hooked. So numbers matter, folks. Always make sure to try and get the best one, especially if you have access to multiple sportsbooks. Another game with postseason implications, UTSA continues to be a force at home, dominating East Carolina 58-24 and effectively knocking them out of the American title picture. The Pirates have been a great home team, but have struggled a little bit on the road. This was a great spot that we were all over on the podcast last week. Hopefully, all of you cashed out with the Roadrunners alongside us. And one of the most fun games of the day, UConn completes their season with a 48-45 win on the road at Florida Atlantic. Again, not really sure why some of these teams are just taking the final week of the season off. I suppose maybe that's because UConn is an independent and nobody was able to schedule them there. But either way, a 9-3 year for Jim Mora Jr. His name is finally starting to pop up for some other head coaching openings. I know UConn fans would like to keep that as quiet as possible, but it's hard to imagine him not taking a better job this offseason. Moving to the night slate, I think we should start with one that hits a little close to home for me, and that is the Florida Gators getting absolutely trampled at home by the Tennessee Volunteers. This was Tennessee's first win in the Swamp since 2003, and you could see the 20 years worth of frustrations that they took out on this team. Florida looked lifeless in this one offensively. Tennessee's defense has been bad all season, but they shut Florida out in the first half. Final score in this one, 31-11. You could see it immediately on the first drive that Tennessee was going to roll here. This was an easy live bet spot, and it allows Tennessee to potentially finish their season 9-3, likely still outside the playoff field, but a strong season again for Josh Heupel nonetheless. Over in the Big 12, we had arguably the game of the year between Kansas State and Utah. This game was absolutely insane. K-State led for most of the first half and had a 31-21 lead at the break. At that point of the game, Kansas State had almost 400 yards rushing before the break. I think they finished with 9 runs of 30 plus by the end of this one. Just explosive plays all over the place. No defense to be found. Just a classic Big 12 matchup here. Out of the break, it looks like Utah was going to take control with 2 quick touchdowns. They took the lead 35-31, but Kansas State responded with what should have been 17 straight points of their own. However, up 41-35, they scored a touchdown to go up by 12. Went for 2, obviously, to try to extend it to a 14-point game, but it was intercepted and returned for 2 points for Utah, which made it a 10-point game. Utah scores to cut it to 3, gets the ball back in a great position now at this point because they can either settle for a field goal to tie or potentially score and win it, and that is exactly what they did. More explosive plays down the stretch, and at least 2 touchdowns scored in every single quarter. 51-47 the final here. Utah keeps their playoff hopes alive. Dramatic game by Kansas State and very impressive effort, but they will need to beat Colorado this upcoming week now to make it to a bowl. Another big game in the Big 12 was BYU just continuing to defy the odds and exceed expectations. They go on the road and beat Cincinnati 26-14. They have responded after the loss to Texas Tech with their 2 best performances of the entire season, and they are now 10-1. since he has lost 3 straight games. And if you look at BYU's approach in this game, it really was just true physicality on both sides of the ball. They gave it to their hammer of a back, LJ Martin, 32 times for 222 and 2 scores on the ground. That's a lot of twos. LJ Martin all over the place on the ground, and their defense really just held down a very explosive Cincy offense that was getting some key players back from injury. Thought that would help them a lot, did not, and only able to score 1 touchdown prior to the fourth quarter. So impressive performance, to say the least, by BYU once again. Huge game in the ACC. Pitt goes on the road to number 16 Georgia Tech and really controls it from start to finish, wins it 42-28. Pitt, coming off of the tough loss to Notre Dame, really were never in that one, but they were clearly looking ahead to this ACC battle. They still need some help to make it to the ACC championship game, but they've got another huge one coming up against Miami, and this is the first step. The fact that they were only plus 2.5 on the road indicated that the books thought they were the better team, and they were correct. Mason Heinschel continues to play exceptionally well as a true freshman who's been inserted into the lineup. Struggled against that very athletic defense of Notre Dame, but bounced back nicely here. Georgia Tech's defense has been extremely leaky most of the season. We'll see if they can bounce back this week. Penn State clearly doesn't think their season is dead. They went out there and probably played their best game of the year against Nebraska. 37-10, the final here. Katron Allen becomes Penn State's all-time leading rusher with 160 on the ground. That continues to be the biggest weakness for the Huskers. Penn State, remarkably, after starting 0-6 in Big Ten play, has a chance to make it to a bowl if they can just beat Rutgers at home this final week. I would say they've got a pretty good chance of doing so, and will give them a nice springboard for whatever coach takes that open job. An even more surprising result in the Big Ten was Wisconsin pulling off an outright win over number 21 Illinois, 27-10. I told you guys this Badger defense continues to play better and better. They've got some true NFL prospects on that side of the ball that are emerging, some young guys that are continuing to get more snaps as the season goes on, and it seems like the team has responded very well to Wisconsin confirming that Luke Fickell will be back next year. 2 individual players I want to spotlight on that defense. Mason Posa, true freshman defensive end from New Mexico, has been balling. And then Darren Peterson's brother is actually on this defense as well. Daryl, shout out to both of them. 2 of the better players on that side of the ball in the Big Ten right now. Last power conference game that I'll bring up here is LSU. Gotta highlight this team. What a disaster of a performance. They escape with a 13-10 home win over Western Kentucky. This offense has been so uninspiring all year long, and it's just incredibly disappointing for a team I had very high hopes for, especially on that side of the ball, given how many talented pass catchers they have. Just have not been able to put it together with the quarterback, the offensive line, and the play caller. Obviously, going to have a coaching change down there. We will see who it is very soon. And we'll end the Week 13 recap with your weekly North Texas update. You know I love this Mean Green team. Been high on them all season. They started very slow in this one against Rice on the road. They trailed 14-0. From that point forward, they outscored them 56-10. So no worries there. Drew Mestamaker throws for 469 and 3 touchdowns. It seems like him and running back Caleb Hawkins have just been trading off, going off for big performances week after week. Extremely explosive and balanced offense, and very excited to see this team hopefully in the playoff field if they can win that American Conference title game. All right, time to shift our focus forward to Week 14. Unfortunately, the final week of the regular season, so let's enjoy every last second of it. It is rivalry week. We've got a ton of high-profile matchups. Typically, I would start off with a little Maction play for you guys. I just don't see a ton of value in the board. I may get to something when we get closer to the games on Tuesday, but right now, gun to my head, I would lean Eastern Michigan plus the 7.5 at home against Western Michigan. That should be a close rivalry game, maybe, but then again, Western has a lot more to play for there, so probably not going to play anything too strong in either one of these games. UMass is completely unbettable, so don't take them against Bowling Green, but some pretty gross matchups this week on Tuesday night. There is a big game on Thursday. This is the Thanksgiving special, and it's Navy traveling to Memphis. Another game with conference title implications. Memphis has knocked themselves out of it with a couple of losses here down the stretch, but they've got a chance to play spoiler here against a Navy team that is technically still in the running, but they're going to need a loss either from North Texas or Tulane this week. I like Memphis to take care of business. I don't know that I feel great about laying the -5.5, but I certainly lean that way, and I won't be betting on Navy regardless of the number. So give me Memphis at the minimum as a lean. The Friday slate this year is fantastic. They've done a really good job in recent years of kind of spreading out the rivalry week a little bit. We've got 13 games spread across the board on Friday beginning at noon. For some reason, 5 of the 13 games actually kick off at noon. Maybe could have spaced those out a little bit better, but let's get into some of the specific ones I want to highlight here. We do have a couple of bets locked in. If you're following us on Twitter, you will have seen this post already. But the first bet we've got locked in is Mississippi State plus 8.5 against Ole Miss. We've already gotten some line value on this one as it's sitting around 7 now on most books. So already a 1.5 in our direction. On paper, Ole Miss seems to be a fairly safe playoff team. But if they lose this game, they really open up the conversation considering how many other 2-loss teams are still in this thing, especially given that their head coach may not even be on the team for these playoff games. We have to see whether Lane Kiffin will be remaining at Ole Miss or taking another job such as LSU or Florida. As much as it maybe shouldn't, that may factor into the committee's decision to leave them out of the field. I noticed that before this game, even though both them and Mississippi State had a bye week last week, the odds for Ole Miss to miss the playoffs have moved from plus 1,200 down to about plus 450. So I really think if they lose this game, they may be in trouble. Got to go take care of business. I'm not so confident they will. Loved this Mississippi State all season. They've been very undervalued. Let's ride with them one more time. Another bet we've got locked in on Friday night is Georgia Tech plus 14 against Georgia. Very key number there of 2 touchdowns. I would not play it as big at a smaller number. I do expect Georgia to win the game. I just think Georgia Tech will give a better effort all around here than in the Pittsburgh game. They kind of got caught by surprise, I felt like, early on there. We're not very prepared, but they're always prepared to play Georgia. Last year, this game went to 8 overtimes. Not sure we're going to get a repeat of that, but I think it'll be closer than 2 scores. Another one that I haven't posted yet, but I'm going to lock in right here on the podcast with you guys, and that is Arizona against Arizona State. The Wildcats are actually a slight favorite on the road, despite these two teams having the same record and Arizona State being ranked. And as of this moment, at least, Arizona is unranked. I still think the Wildcats are the better team. They're playing much better right now. They're healthier. Their defense is better. Arizona State's quarterback situation is a little bit murky, so give me the Wildcats on the road there. Some other key games to discuss on Friday. Utah traveling to Kansas. They are still looking to sneak into the playoff as an at-large bid. They're in a decent position at number 12, so just got to win and win emphatically. I think they will. Kansas is not quite as physical of a run team as Kansas State, as we saw in their head-to-head matchup. I think Utah's defense bounces back in a big way here. I would lay the number on the road with the Utes. Another game at noon on Friday is Nebraska hosting Iowa. Can't really do much worse than Nebraska did on the road at Penn State. Can't really defend the run much worse than they did. I'm expecting a much better effort here. These games are usually very close, one possession almost every year. So Nebraska +6 is another play here. I've actually been impressed by TJ Lateef. Didn't have his best game there against Penn State, but he's done an admirable job stepping in for Dylan Raiola. And I just don't trust Iowa's offense to be able to create margin here, so I will take the dog. Couple of win and you're in games, both for North Texas against Temple. They're -20.5. I'm not going to lay that number, just certainly count on the Mean Green to win this game. The bet that's been a wagon for them week after week has been their team total over, so that might be the way to play this one. Again, the offense is just an absolute juggernaut. And same scenario for San Diego State, but not quite as straightforward of a matchup. They've got to travel to New Mexico, and they are just a 1.5-point favorite. New Mexico can still technically get into the Mountain West title game, but they would need a Boise loss at Utah State. Looks like Boise's about -3.5 in that game. So New Mexico needs both underdogs in those matchups to win, but obviously still fighting for something there, and a very solid season for Jason Eck in year one there coming over from Idaho. Maybe the biggest game of Friday is Texas hosting Texas A&M. Aggies going for a 12-0, perfect regular season. They survived against South Carolina last week. They had a bit of a warm-up game this weekend against FCS Samford, beat them 48-0 without a sweat. Probably got some extra practice time in there against live competition, so that helps. Texas is just a 2.5-point dog in this game, though, and you may say that seems real short, huh? However, if you looked at this line in the preseason, Texas would have been a 10.5-point favorite. If we remember looking back there, they were the number one team coming into the season. Everyone had extremely high expectations for them and still tempered for A&M until they could show us. Well, they've shown us, and I think they continue to do so. I like Texas A&M to complete their undefeated season. However, if Texas wins this game, be prepared for the playoff committee to try and make a case for them to get into the field even at 9-3. I don't agree with it. I'm just warning you that it's going to happen. All right, let's take a look at the Monster Saturday slate. And of course, we've got to start with the game. This one kicks off at noon every single year, so let's get it started. Michigan is currently about a 10-point underdog at home against Ohio State. The number was as high as 13.5 last week before the Maryland game. There is no doubt Ohio State is the more talented team. They've played better throughout the season. They're 11-0. They have all the good things on their side, and yet I really see no reason why this year should be any different than the previous four. If you really dive into this matchup, Ohio State has some of the same vulnerabilities that Michigan has consistently taken advantage of in recent years. Michigan also gave themselves a little bit of a momentum boost there with the nice outburst on offense against Maryland. The game is in Ann Arbor. We have a chance of snow in this game with a total at 44.5. Ohio State has not been a great running team this year, despite they're really rolling through their schedule. The defense has been dominant. However, you can move the ball on them between the 20s. It's just they've been so elite in the red zone. It hasn't shown up so much on the stat sheet. If Michigan can just take advantage of their big receivers in the red zone and finish some drives, I really think they could be a live underdog here once again. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a Michigan fan. I will always be 100% behind them in this matchup. But I'll be honest with you guys, there was a time during the middle of this season where I was convinced that Ohio State was going to win this game by 30 points. I no longer feel that way whatsoever, not only based on the Maryland game, but also, funny enough, based on the Northwestern game, Michigan escaped that one with a 2-point win and had 5 turnovers, but they really dominated statistically. So I think they've been building up very well for the past few weeks and are prepared for this moment once again. And I think Sharon Moore moves to 3-0 in his career versus Ohio State. Very excited for this game, of course. A couple of bets that we have locked in. One of my favorite is going to be Auburn plus 5.5 against Alabama. You can get 6.5s out there now, it appears as well. I'm not too worried about the number, though. I really think Auburn can win this game outright. I am very, very concerned for Alabama and our national title futures with them. Alabama historically has not fared well in the Iron Bowl when there is pressure to perform, especially on the road at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn struggled a little bit in the first half this past weekend, but the offense took off after that. Deuce Knight, the freshman, has been unleashed, and he is clearly a very talented quarterback. I see him giving Alabama some major issues this weekend, and Auburn very well could be a live dog in this situation, would really throw a wrench into the SEC's playoff plans. Another one in the SEC that we've got locked in is going to be Florida minus a 2.5. Another number that you could maybe get better now, but I don't mind it. Anything up to 3 works for me. I think they win this game against Florida State. I talked about the Noles' struggles on the road earlier, 0-4 straight up, and the last 3 in ACC play, they've scored 13 points at Stanford, 10 at Clemson, and then 11 most recently at NC State. Florida's a much better defense than any of those, and I think they're going to absolutely clamp down on Castellanos and this run game. Just got to expect a better performance and a nice buy low spot after the blowout loss to Tennessee. And the third and final bet that we have locked in for Saturday at this current moment is going to be Washington plus 7.5. We did get some value here. It's now sitting at 6.5. This is against Oregon. Oregon, huge pressure on them in this game. They've got to win it. I am not convinced that a 10-2 Ducks team makes it into the field. Their resume is just not that impressive this year. Their win at Penn State does not hold as much value as it otherwise would have. Washington has been ascending in most power ratings the past couple of weeks, and I think they've got enough offense to match Oregon. They can also match them in the run game with Jonah Coleman, which is very key. Oregon has really struggled to play on the road at Washington, so big opportunity for Dan Lanning to exercise some demons, but I like Washington to, at the minimum, keep this within a possession. All right, I'm going to give you guys a couple more plays that I like before we get out of here. But if you want a more thorough breakdown of the entire slate, be sure to join us live on Spaces over on Twitter at 10 a.m. Eastern Time every single Saturday. My handle is dailycfbcbb. You should already be following me over there, but just in case you're not, that would be the handle to search to join the space. Not only Saturday morning, but I just got off of one for Feast Week. College basketball, we've got a ton of tournaments and high-level matchups this week, so tune into those as well. But as I said, I'll give you guys a couple more plays. One is going to be Duke. Got to go back to this team one more time. They have screwed us a few times this season, but stayed off them the past few weeks, and for good reason. They just have not looked good defensively. However, huge advantage on offense against this Wake Forest team. They're 6-5. They're favored against an 8-3 team. That is very telling to me. I think Duke has a significant talent advantage and wins this game to finish the season on a strong note. And another team that I like in basically a pick'em spot is Wisconsin. Getting just 1.5 points on the road at Minnesota indicates that the books think they're the better team, and I completely agree. They're the better roster, better defense, playing much better overall right now. Minnesota just gave up over 500 yards to Northwestern. Not exactly an explosive offense. So I think if there was any team that Wisconsin was going to score some points against to go along with that defense playing better, I think this is the spot. All right, that will do it for the podcast this week. appreciate every single one of you for tuning in. And if you're listening to this leading up to Thanksgiving, I hope you have a great holiday with you and your family. And until next week, have a great rest of your day.